who we're targeting students who were expected to have learned to read already. Now they're expected to read to learn, and they need help getting the words off the page still. Like, how do we help those students? So let's get started. We are going to first touch on what structured literacy is very briefly and some current issues that we may be experiencing. A little bit of the structure of the Spanish language to get us started, assessment, data, how to organize and analyze it, how to deliver a lesson, and some resources. Last PLC, I introduced some myths and facts. I just want to go over them really quickly because I didn't go back to them last time. So, myth or fact, MLs can have dyslexia. This is a fact. We could have dyslexia in any language. Typically, if a student is struggling in their L1, they will struggle in the same areas in subsequent languages they're learning to read in. Myth or fact, literacy screening of MLs should not be administered in English. This is a myth. Students should be screened ideally in both of the languages that they're learning to read in. Some people think, oh, well, they're not proficient in English, so we shouldn't be screening them. But that is a myth. Even though they're not proficient, we can still get valuable data and a baseline from the assessment, and we can use that for progress monitoring and to inform instruction. Myth or fact, MLs learn to read differently than monolingual speakers. This is also a myth. Yes, we're going to have to do some things differently. We're going to have to put in some scaffolds. We want cross-linguistic transfer. But the process of learning to read is the same, and no matter what language you are learning to read in I'm talking like alphabetic languages. Like, we want sound letter correspondence. We want to teach all the same kinds of things, no matter what language that they're learning to read in. So structured literacy and ML literacy, some current issues, and getting into structured literacy. So again, structured literacy is not, and we talked about this last PLC, just to review, it's not a program, it's a method. It's very diagnostic, so it's tailored to individualized needs of our students. It's very explicit, there's no guessing. We're telling the student exactly what they're learning. It's systematic in the way we teach. We go from simple to more complex, and we make sure that students have the foundation they need to learn the next complex skill. So who's responsible for teaching our students at these higher levels, at these higher grade levels, to read? When they come to us, they might come to us from another district, from another country, and who's responsible for their literacy instruction? Is it us, the ESL teacher? Is it the homeroom teacher? Is it their ELA teacher, the interventionist, special education teachers? And then, like, there's so many different programs. Like, are they in a transitional bilingual program? Are they in a dual language program? Are they in an ESL push-in program or pull-out? Like, there's so many different contexts that our students are finding themselves in, and how do we ensure that they are getting their needs met? So just kind of like a disclaimer, I am not advocating at all for just teaching them some Spanish skills just to transfer them over to English. The absolute ideal is to develop multiliterate students. But when we are in a situation where that is not possible, then there are things that we can do to help our students move along. Unfortunately, a lot of districts don't have bilingual or dual language programs, we have to make do with what we have. There are not a lot of Spanish bilingual teachers, interventionists. So when this ideal is not attainable, one avenue is to teach the student how to decode in their L1 so that we can transition them into English. But again, I am not advocating for this. The ideal is, biliteracy when possible. And also this presentation is not like trying to be a comprehensive training program or replacement for the necessary training that goes into this, but I do want to leave you with some strategies and a little bit of a game plan to help you if you are experiencing any of the challenges. So I started on this journey because throughout my 20-year career as an ESL teacher, I had those students sitting in front of me from grades 2 all the way through grades 12 who I didn't know how to help. My heart always broke because I didn't know how to get them reading. I felt incompetent. I felt like I just wasn't prepared to help them. And so this has been like my life's journey, and like, how do I get these kids, to read? So that's really what this presentation is about. Just how do we help them? How do we just get them started? So some considerations that we want to think of as we are as we're thinking of like, should I even try to teach my student how to read in Spanish? There really is no like one size fits all answer. Every student is different. So we have to think about, first of all, is their native language even Spanish? Like, we have a lot of students from Guatemala who really some just don't benefit from learning how to read in Spanish. Like, some really need just English instruction. So we want to look at what's their native language. Do they have any formal education? Was it interrupted? Could they use some of those foundational skills some instruction in those foundational skills? Maybe they didn't receive it. We want to look at if they've been in our school district since kindergarten, right? I've been in districts where the student has been in district since kindergarten, and I get them in, 3rd, 4th grade, and they still can't read. Like, what's going on here? We want to look at all these factors. Typically, if a student is struggling to decode in Spanish and in English, when they get intervention, it will typically be easier to teach them a little bit first in Spanish so that they can transfer it over to English than just going to the English. But again, this is on a case-by-case basis. The good thing is that like any literacy foundational skills we teach them in their L1 will absolutely transfer to their L2 to English. So I know some concerns I had was, I don't know where to start. I don't have materials for this. When I was at the high school, my argument was kind of, well, they're in high school, so they need to learn English reading because they're going to be graduating soon. So I've got to spend time on the English, so shouldn't that's where my focus be? And I'm not a proficient Spanish speaker. I'm learning Spanish, but I'm not proficient. So, can I even do this? And so I was at NJIDA, which is the International Dyslexia Association conference this past fall, and Elsa Cardenas-Hagen said, you can teach the structure of the language and how to decode it. You don't have to be a proficient speaker of it. Like, of course, this is not the ideal, but even as ESL teachers, when we're teaching reading in English, we can learn about the structure of our students' L1 to help them achieve some cross-linguistic transfer. So this is kind of what I've been doing, just trying to learn the structure of the Spanish language as best I can to help see like what are common ties, how can I help them transfer. Again, not the ideal. The ideal would obviously be, a Spanish native reading specialist, Spanish speaking reading specialist, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things that we can't do to help our students along. So I'm just curious, does any of this at all that I've spoken about resonate with any of you? And if you'd like to put in the chat or call out any challenges that you may be experiencing right now, just so when I go through the presentation, I can maybe speak to some of that.
You already have one question. At what point do you release their L1 and solely speak in the L2 language?
So again, this is going to be on a case-by-case basis. If you have a child who's really struggling, then you want to make sure that they have some reading fluency in their L1 before you transfer over to the L2. Now, students can definitely learn to read at the same time in two languages. But again, I'm focusing right now on our strugglers. There's something going on. They either are dyslexic, mild to moderately to severely. They either, are 17 years old and maybe had, a few years of formal schooling and they're struggling. Like, you're going to see in your lessons, like, if this kid is just struggling to decode a syllable, then we want to build some fluency in the L1 before we transfer over to the L2. Especially also if the child does not speak English, it's going to be a lot harder to just teach them how to read in English right off the bat.
Danny?
Oh,
Hello.
sorry. I didn't realize. Hi.
Hi, my name is Fanny Pusey. Bilingual teacher at Pine Grove Manor School, elementary school. I'm
Okay, nice.
having,
Nice to meet you.
yeah, I'm really happy to be here because I'm having a really difficult and a big challenge with a student. He's from Honduras, and we're having that challenge that he's not recognizing the sounds of syllables and neither the alphabet. So like, I have to start teaching him like to read, lectoescritura, writing and reading
Yeah.
too. So this is being challenged for me because I also have a meeting with the coach, Miss Gonzalez, and we were talking about the different strategies we can use so we can help him so he can progress academically, because it's frustrating for us as teachers that we try to give them the best, but like you're not seeing the outcome that you want sometimes, he's get frustrated. So I start using strategies she gave to me, and we're working good, but still working with these strategies, I see he's still struggling with sounds. Like I will repeat it 3-4 times. I make like the strategies she gave to me, then we practice, then we have dictation, but he's still having these struggles with the syllable sounds in his native language, Spanish. So it's a big challenge. We're still working on it. We try to see how we progress with him during this time, but it's really a challenge for me.
Are you teaching him in Spanish to read?
Yeah, in Spanish.
Okay.
In Spanish.
Okay, so hopefully you will learn some things tonight that you can try out. You can always reach out to me and I can, help you with specific issues that you're having.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to say, this seems to be a common theme, is students with no literacy in their L1. So I've got 3 questions about that. And then to Diana, this is going to focus on Spanish only. So I don't know if we can really address students who speak Arabic today.
Right. So our next PLC in January, I'm going to focus on teaching the structure of the English language for our MLs who do not speak Spanish, or they might speak Spanish, and it's going to focus on teaching English. But I wanted to do this one first to really focus on the Spanish speaking children and how to get them reading in their L1. And unfortunately, I don't either know Arabic or how I would even begin to teach Arabic. But if you want to come to our PLC in January, it's going to focus on how you can begin to teach English through structured literacy. So I had a student, Margaret, in high school. He was 17 years old and he could not even write his name in Spanish. So this presentation is going to address students like that. Okay, so here we go. All right, so let's get into the structure of the Spanish language. This is important, having some knowledge of this, because we're going to teach. Remember, we teach from simple to complex. So knowing the structure of the Spanish language is going to help us teach from simple to complex. So we have 5 vowel sounds, 23 phonemes. Whoa, what did I do? We have the CH-double-L-double-R. They are considered single consonants for when we like divide words. So if you divide a word with, you know, an RR in the middle, the RR stays together, for example. Spanish has different syllable types, just like English has different syllable types. The syllable types in Spanish are easier because all of the vowels have one-to-one correspondence, meaning you have one sound for each vowel and one spelling. So it's much easier than English. So the open syllable is just a syllable that ends in a vowel, like ma, la. A closed syllable, you have one syllable and it ends in a consonant. So like mes, dos, it ends in a consonant, one syllable. That's called closed syllable. We say that the syllable is, the vowel is closed in by the consonant. There's a consonant after the vowel. Vowel consonant E, it exists in English and in Spanish. However, in English, the E is silent. Vowel R, you have a vowel with an R. It's just a syllable type. You have a vowel pair. So like the AU would be a vowel pair. And you have a final stable syllable. So like sion. We have the same kind of stable syllable in English, which is TION, shin. And then we have our syllable patterns. And these are what we teach our students to help them read, decode words. We teach them how to cut words, and this helps them to break it down. A lot of students who struggle to read, they just see letters in front of them and they don't know where to start and how to break it down into easy, manageable pieces. So your syllable patterns are consonant vowel, that's that open syllable. Then you have 2 open syllables together, CV-CV. Then you have your VCV, which is like uno. So we teach them to cut the word after the first vowel. Then you have VCCV. We also have this in English. We teach the students to cut between the 2 consonants unless it's a blend or like double L, double R, CH, then they stay together. Closed syllable. Then we have our blends, which also stay together, and then our vowel-vowel pattern. So Spanish prefers open syllables. If we have a single consonant and it appears between 2 vowels, then the consonant is going to go with the following vowel, not the one preceding it. So it's not cas, it's cas. Okay. So again, we're going to be teaching our kids how to cut words. So we need to know some of these rules and just the structure of the language. So all those R and L blends are inseparable. So when we divide the word abre, it would be abre because the BR cannot be separated. Okay, so as we're teaching, we want to be diagnostic as we teach. So what I started finding out as I was teaching students to read in Spanish is that a lot of the programs out there will teach by consonant and they'll change the vowel. So like they'll give a word list with like ma, me, mi, mo, mu, but that is so confusing for students who are struggling to read. So instead, you want to keep the vowel the same. So instead of the ma, me, mi, mo, mu, you would teach ma, sa, la, etc. So you're going to teach by vowel. And that's the same for English. Students with vowel confusion in English, we would teach all like short A words. We wouldn't go into all the consonants at once. That's too much for them to handle. And again, we're diagnostic. So this isn't going to look the same for every student. It's going to be by what your student needs. When teaching closed syllables, and I will get into this, but some students can't handle all the closed syllables at once, like as, es, is, os. They need just as syllables or just is syllables. So just something to keep in mind. Spanish is very transparent. So if a student is having trouble decoding, you know that there's something going on. That is a red flag. Typically, students who are dyslexic and are Spanish and are readers and speakers of Spanish, they say that fluency is really typically what you will see students struggling with, that they can decode, but they're just slow, or it's more comprehension issues. I don't know. From my experience, I've seen most students have issues at the decoding level, just decoding the word. So I just put some potentially tricky, things here just to be aware of. So the first thing we're going to get into here is our literacy assessments. So first, we just want to overall gather some data. So look at their access tests or WIDA tests. If we have a dyslexia screener available in English and Spanish, that is ideal. Giving any reading diagnostics in both languages also is ideal. And just gathering like parent information, student records, talking to the parents about their experiences learning in their home country. And then these are the assessments that I give students. So again, ideally in both languages, we're seeing how's their letter name ID, sound symbol correspondence, oral reading fluency. Typically, our students are not reading with fluency at all. Phonological awareness, spelling, and comprehension. Again, comprehension is usually not really the issue here because we're just trying to get them to decode at this point.
Yep.
So I'm using the Core Phonics survey. I have a Padlet with all of these resources for you. So this hits letter name ID, sound symbol, reading the sounds. It does do some spelling of initial and final sounds. I administer it, so I'm having the student spell every sound that they were given to read. I just add the sounds that they were all the sounds they were supposed to read, I have them write them, like I'll dictate it to them. And then the spell words. So Core Phonics gives you like what parts of the test you should administer by grade level. And they also give you benchmark scores for the test. So they have an English one and a Spanish one. So you can just use this to see, does my student need intensive intervention? Their scores would be down here. Strategic would be like they're in the yellow. Intensive would be like they're in the red. And they're on benchmark here. They would be in the green. They would be like at grade level. If you want to do some oral fluency assessments, I have used RAS Kids for this. You can look at their words correct per minute. Just have them read for 1 minute and see how many words correct they're able to read. What is their accuracy of those words read? And if you want to look at their prosody, you can also do that. I linked a rubric here. And this just looks at the different dimensions of fluency. But again, like if we're just trying to get our kids to decode, fluency is not going to be, once they can decode, they'll be more fluent. So that's not like what we're mainly worried about right now. But if you just want to get it for like a baseline, that's fine. Sorry, I'm just trying to present this. Okay. So we have administered our data. So now we want to analyze it a little bit. So I just took some notes. This is just like an example of one of my like core phonics assessments. I just highlighted like what they really needed. And from here, once I look at exactly what they need, I go over to my scope and sequence and I circle in red all the reading errors. I circle in blue all the spelling errors. I made this one up. This is fake, but this is kind of what it's going to look like. You're going to go to your scope and sequence and you're going to circle what you need to teach. Now, I made this scope and sequence up. I made it up based on many different programs. I pulled from, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Escalera, but I looked at Escalera. I looked at Amplify as a program. So I looked at theirs. You can download like phonics Spanish scope and sequences for free. So this is just my own kind of scope and sequence, what I put together from different programs and just from my training in structured literacy. But I'm not saying that this is how you should teach or the order you should teach. It does go from more simple to complex. Oops. And I'm just gonna pull this up. And this is still a work in progress too. I'm sharing all of this with you, but I'm always like changing things around. But this is what you're going to be teaching. You're going to be teaching the phonemes, the vowels, the consonants. As you can see, they get harder here as we go down. The syllabication patterns and syllable types, you want to explicitly teach to children, how do we cut up words with these patterns? We want to make sure they know what a consonant is and a vowel is. They need to know what a consonant and vowel is before they can start cutting up words. And then we're teaching them how to spell 1 syllables, 2 syllables, spell and read. And then if you want to infuse grammar in there, I will show you how to do that as well. So your scope and sequence becomes like your go-to for when you're planning lessons. You're going to be referring to it. I'm just going to pause because I feel like that was kind of a lot. I don't know. Does anyone have any questions before I go on? So we administered our data. Any questions, or administered our assessments? Any questions on assessment? Okay, and then we have some of our data here. We transfer it over to our scope and sequence. And then as I start teaching, I like to make like a little bit of a plan as I get to know the student. And again, I shared this with you as well, but I'll put the date and then I'll put like what I'm planning to teach here on the right. So I have the date and the skill, and this just helps me keep track of the direction I'm going in. Again, this is always subject to change, but this is a nice planning tool. You can also put all your data into a like a log, a reader portrait. So WIDA has one that I linked if you would like to use theirs. I took WIDA's and kind of reconfigured it, and I combined it with other data that I collect. So you can see here. Oops. So you can check, like, let's say my student speaks Spanish, they speak English, or whatever languages they speak, and then I can check, like, what do they speak? Like, I could put, you know, maybe their proficiency level if I wanted. Can they read in English? Can they speak in Spanish? I can write yes, no, whatever. Like, this is just for you to keep your data all in one place. I put all the core phonics subtests here. So this would all be for Spanish. And then if you want to do for English, so, you know, you can make a copy of this and tailor it to your own, you know, your own needs and what assessments you give. So that's another option for just organizing your data, looking at it so you know, okay, like, what do I need to teach? Like, where am I going to start? So again, as I get into like what the lesson looks like, I just want to give a disclaimer that this is a crash course and like not intended to be like a full training on how to give like all the needed elements in a structured literacy lesson. There is a lot that goes into it, but I really want to get you started on your way. So orthographic mapping is something that's really important. Is anyone familiar with orthographic mapping? Should I go into it? I don't want to.
Could you go into it a little bit, please?
Yeah, sure. So orthographic mapping means that the child is making a connection between the spelling, the pronunciation, and the meaning of a word, and they're mapping it in their brain, basically. And this only happens through decoding practice. So they're not memorizing words. It's not like sight word memorization. They're actually going through the process of looking at the phonemes and blending them together. And I'm sure you've sat with a struggling reader and they take forever, like, to read a sentence. Like, they're decoding each word and it's painful and you just want to tell them the word, right? Like, well, that's the process that they need in order to map the word in their brain. So eventually it becomes automatic. We want all words that students read to eventually become sight words and them not needing to decode the word phoneme by phoneme and then blend it together. So if you have the word cat, you want them to just be able to read cat effortlessly. But there is a time in their reading development where they have to decode it and they're like, cat. And that's the orthographic mapping process. And once the word is mapped in the brain, it becomes a sight word. It becomes automatic. And students need decoding practice in order for this to happen. Any questions about orthographic mapping? So if a word is mapped in the brain, this lessens the cognitive load, and now they're able to focus on comprehension because they're not focusing so heavily on decoding. They can automatically read the word, and that frees up their mind to focus on what's actually like going on in this text. So the reason I bring this up is twofold. One is because there's a little bit of a debate on, do we teach Spanish by phoneme or syllable? I'm not super knowledgeable about this, but I do know that typically Spanish is taught to emergent readers through like syllables, and English is more taught like by individual phonemes. So like when we're teaching kids to decode, we have them like look at the individual phonemes. But Spanish is such like a syllabic language that a lot of programs teach at the syllable level. I don't know, you know, what it is like in every program, but I do know that there was this study done that showed, it was done with Portuguese speaking kindergartners, and some students were taught to read through like phonemes, so like individual letters, and then some were taught to decode and to like map, orthographic mapping of syllables instead of phonemes. So they were taught like like ma, right, instead of right? So the study also investigated whether showing kids pictures of the mouth and how sounds were articulated, if that helped students. And it was found that students who were taught using orthographic mapping of phonemes, in addition to articulatory gestures, they did make the most progress. So I was talking to our director, Kathleen Fernandez, about this, and she said something phenomenal. She said, you know what? You throw it at the wall, you throw it all at the wall, and you see what sticks. And, you know, it's true. What works for one student might not work for another. So you have to see what works. So I kind of combined both, and I teach at the phoneme level, and I also teach at the syllable level. So again, with our strugglers, we don't know what's going to work. So why not try a little bit of everything till we find out what is working for them. So first, I'm going to go through what the review side of the lesson is going to look like. Just to remember, it's very important that in the review side of your lesson, nothing on your scope and sequence that is circled can be on the review side of your lesson. So if you circled if you circled I, for example, you're not in the review side of your lesson, you're not going to ask a child to read a word with I. They will not write the letter I. They will not spell a word with the letter I. So nothing in the first part of your lesson will have anything that they don't already know or that they have not been already taught. We want to aim for 90% accuracy in all parts of our lesson, because we want it to be a little challenging for them, but we don't want it to be so easy, or I mean, so frustrating that they just can't do it. So we want them to feel successful, but we also don't want them getting hundreds on everything as well. So I also shared with you a lesson plan template, and it's color-coded to match the presentation. You will get a copy of the presentation and the lesson plan template. So the first part is read sounds. So in structured literacy in English, we have a sound pack where we have students really quickly. I hold my pack up. It looks like this. So I have all my sounds. And they're reading this. I taught a cutting pattern. So I asked them, where do you cut? That's my eliciting question. And I go through and they're reading their sounds. So you would do this in Spanish as well. They would read the sounds. Remember, this is only what they know. And then I would go to syllables and I would do some syllables. So I have some of my single phonemes and then I have some syllables. On the side here, you have a place for notes. You put the student name. Let's say they, instead of reading ma, they read may. I would put that down. And then I would put, like, let's say they got whatever the number is, 19 out of 20, they got 98%. And I would put the percentage right there. So you can track how they're doing. So that is the first part of the lesson. Make sure you mark errors on the lesson plan, because eventually we're going to go back and we're going to see, are there any prevalent errors? What do they keep missing? Any errors that they make. So let's say they, read this boy as A or whatever. I would put it 3 back in the card pack so they could read it again. But before I do that, I'm going to put it in front of the student and they're going to trace and say either the syllable or the letter 3 times. So let's say I have a student who confuses M and N. So let's say she read M as N. I would put the card in front of her and I would say trace and say, and she would trace the M sound only and just go 3 times. Okay, how are we doing? Are there any questions? I can't see the question, but are we good? Yes, okay.
Yes,
So
yeah,
next,
no questions. Yeah.
okay. All right, so next we're gonna go to spell sounds and syllables. So you're going to dictate 5 to 10 sounds or syllables. You always want to include the last 3 concepts that you have taught. So let's say my last 3 concepts were A, CH, and I don't know, J or whatever. Then I'm going to just follow this script. I'm going to say to the student, say, they will repeat say and write The student will also have their sound charts and syllable charts out as scaffolds. Eventually, we want to be able to take these away, but at first, if the student needs them, we let them use it. If they make an error, we just cross out what they wrote and we have them say and write it 3 times. And we want to either write it correctly for them to see, or we can point it out on their chart and they're going to say and write it 3 times. The saying and the writing is part of multisensory instruction that students need in order to be successful. So the saying is, the pronunciation part, the writing it is the kinesthetic. So yes, I have every time you see like a little hand here that has a link to it, I'll just show you really quickly. I have a Padlet that I will share, and it has all this stuff in it, all copies of my Word documents. And then I know Kathy is sharing out like a page with links with everything. So. Okay. Also, just to note, this sound chart right here is for English. Sorry, I accidentally put the English one, but it is all cognates. The pictures are all cognates. I do have an alphabet Spanish sound chart that I will put up. I'm sorry, I meant to replace that. But the syllabus, those are all obviously Spanish. I got those free on Teachers Pay Teachers. So the next part of the lesson is the blending drill. This is going to be especially important for our students who, I don't know if you've experienced this, but they might read a word like masa or whatever it is, casa. You know what I mean? So this is going to help them to build that automaticity. So the way you do the blending drill is, once you've been teaching the student, you could target something, right? So for blending syllables, I had a student who was pretty good at reading 2-syllable words, could not read 3-syllable words. So this blending drill helped her read 3-syllable words. You might have a student, like I said, who's like, asa, and then you'd only want to do like the 2-syllable here. So it's diagnostic based on what your student needs, but they're going to touch each card. So I would be like, and I tell them, some of these are going to be nonsense words. Some of these will be real words. And then after they read it, you can say to them, was that a real word or a nonsense word? But they would touch each card. So it would be ka, ne, mi, and then they would slide their finger across ka, ne, mi. And so this really helps them to build their ability to blend. You can also practice blending phonemes. Like, say you have a kid who's reading syllables like and they can't blend it into ka. So you would just give this C and this A, and you would give all syllable cards. And I would start with only all A. I would do only vowel A, and then change out the consonants. So they'd be like ah, sa. And that's going to help them build that automaticity in their ability to blend. Again, you want to mark errors on your lesson plan. And if they error, then you want to have them trace and say it correctly. So if they read, for example, ka, if they read as sa, you would have them trace the C and just go k, and then ka. Okay, how are we doing? Any questions? I don't want to go too fast or overwhelm.
How do you choose which ones are green? Because this is very OG for me. What's green, what's yellow, what's red? I mean, what's pink? Or
Yeah, so
how do you
the way
organize?
so the way I was thinking about it is like this is first, middle, end for like the syllables. So like green was like the first syllable, then yellow was the second, and then pink was the third, just like beginning, middle, end. That's the way I was looking at it. And then for these, I was thinking just like the first letter in the syllable, and then the second letter in the syllable, and then the first letter in the syllable and the second letter, if that makes sense. I know a lot of programs, they do like all the vowels, one color. So you could do that as well. Again, like it's based on what your kids need. Like right now I'm working with students in English though, but they're having really bad vowel confusion. And so I'm doing the blending drill and I just make sure that all the vowels are in the same color and they know it's a vowel, and I only do 2 vowels. So I feel like there's no rule, there's no like right or wrong. I feel like it's based on what makes sense based on what you're doing. So, okay, the next part is the review side of the lesson plan is the word list. And I will show you the lesson plan template. So after blending drill, we'd actually do phonemic awareness, but we're doing a PLC on that February 24th. It's going to be for teaching reading in English and Spanish. So stay tuned for that. So we do phonemic awareness, and then we do reading our word lists. So in your lesson plan, you're going to write the skill here in letter A that you just taught. So it's the most recently skill taught, the most recent skill you just taught. So let's say I just taught the closed syllables with words on and us. So that's going to be the first reading list. Let's say I did that yesterday. That's going to be the first reading list that my students are going to read in my review lesson the next day. They are going to learn to code the word, and I'm going to show you how to do all that, and then read their word list. The next list they will read is the skill I taught prior to yesterday's skill. So let's say I taught my sílabas trabadas. So maybe I taught words with BR and GR. So that will be the second list that they read on my review day. And let's say before my BR and GR blends, let's say before that, I taught my A syllables. Like I just taught A. Like casa, whatever. That will be the third list that they will read. So this is very OG structured literacy. Like I'm just following the pattern, trying to make it as systematic and cumulative as possible. And it's just in Spanish. And then we always have a rotation or prevalent error list. So let's say my student is struggling to read those CVC words. I'll just make a generic CV list. Maybe I'll add some other vowels. It's not just going to be vowels with A. Maybe they could handle A and E or something like that. So let me go back here. So when you make your word list, you're going to start with the last new concept that you taught. Can you don't know. Can you guys see my screen here? Are we good? Can you see this little like word list here?
Yeah.
Okay. So this word list is also in the materials, but you're going to notice that I have syllable lists and then word lists. So we're going from simple to complex. So first, I'll just have them read some E syllables, and then I'll have them read words with E in it, just to get their brain ready. I always point to the target. So the target here is E, and I'm going to say, okay, what are all these syllables going to say? They're going to say A. And then they're going to read, I'm going to say, okay, now read all these syllables that say A, and then they're going to read them down. So it's kind of preparing them for what they're going to read. This is very scaffolded. But again, this is for students who are struggling. So then the next concept taught, or the next last concept that you taught, will be in the second word list. And then the same thing for the three last concepts that you taught. Okay, so more advanced students. Right now you can see I have one word list at a time. More advanced students, I will add to the Padlet. I have some templates where you can put 4 lists on one page, and more advanced students are fine with that. So you can play around with it. Font choice, you want to do a font where the A isn't funky. So Comic Sans, Century Gothic are good choices for that. So like I said, the student's gonna identify, they can identify the target at the top. You're not gonna tell them, you're gonna ask them, what's the target? What are we practicing here? So they're gonna identify it. They're going to read their syllable list, then their word list. And before they read all the words, they're going to code a word. And I will show you this in a minute, but I have them underline the vowels. And then I say, okay, after they know, after the first vowel, if there's anything after it, that's where they cut. And this is just for CVCV words. That's the rule. They learn the rule. I can't tell you how much this helps them. So once we start decoding, now we can start building some automaticity. We want to build speed at the word level, so then students can get to the phrase and the sentence and the text level. If they can't decode words quickly at the word level, this is why we do word lists. As an ML trained specialist, reading words in isolation was so hard for me to wrap my head around. I was like, this is like blasphemy. Like, what are we doing here when I was going through my OG training? Because it's, you know, we learn to teach thematically and teach, you know, vocabulary and meaning. And yes, we're going to get to all that, but they also need these skills of decoding so they can get to the meaning. And I'm telling you, when I started doing this with my students, it was just magical. So, so a fluency drill is to build automaticity so that the more exposures they get in these fluency drills, their orthographic map, they're creating that orthographic map in their brain, right? Because they're decoding and they're getting quicker and quicker, and the more exposures, and it's going to become a sight word. So that when they get to the text, they're going to be able to just read it instead of having to decode it. So the way you do the automaticity drill is that you're going to say to the student, okay, you're going to follow my pencil as you read. And you're going to point to number 1, and they're going to read it. And then you go to number 2, then you go back up to 1, then you go down to 2, down to 3, then back up to 2, then back up to 1. And you'll see they'll get quicker and quicker. The goal, again, is so they get more exposures and they build that automaticity, that word level automaticity, so then we can build it up to, you know, more connected text. So the next part is our read words error correction. So when you're reading those word lists, and I'll show you where they are in the Padlet here. Okay, so here's one I did for closed syllables. So here were just, the closed syllables. I had a student, I tried to teach her all of these at once. No, was not happening. So I had to just teach us one day. So here are examples of word lists. When they make an error, so let's say they read pala as pasa, or whatever the case may be. You're going to stop them, and you are not going to tell them the word. You are going to error correct them, and you are going to say, trace and say number 5. You're not going to say, oops, or point, or no, you're just going to say, trace and say number 5. You're going to teach them trace and say, and they're going to trace and say each letter and each sound. So they'll, say ah, ooh, ah. If they can't blend it together at that point, some kids they'll be able to segment each sound, but then when they try to blend it together, they'll just say something like out of left field. Then you're going to be their echo, and you're going to say it back, and you're going to say, you just said Allah, or whatever the word is. And so they can hear you and hopefully blend it together. They might need more scaffolding. You might have to say, you just said Allah. You might have to connect it more for them. But that's the error correction for when they make a mistake reading the words. And then you're going to go on your lesson plan in your read word list right here. And you're going to write, for example, asa, pala, whatever. And then you can add up the words and put their percentage. So maybe they got 94% or whatever it was. And this just helps you gauge, like, am I, hitting what they need? Is this too easy? Should I up it a little bit? So the next part of the review side of the lesson plan is the spelling. So here's a little script. You're going to tell the child, say whatever the word is, they'll say it. Then they'll say and finger spell it. And then they will say and write it. Now, if you don't like using finger spelling, you can also I use blocks. So where I have blocks representing the sounds, if that works for you. They always have their chart in front of them, their spelling chart. So you're going to have this out. And we want them using their tools. We want them being independent and using their tools to help them through the learning process. So you're always going to have your spelling chart out during spell words. And you're going to go in the same order on your lesson plan for spell words as you did for read words. So let's say I taught closed syllable last yesterday. So here are my closed syllable words, my R blends, A, and then I'm working on CBCB, for example. Okay, how are we doing? Any questions?
Nope, you're good.
Okay. All right, so the last part of the review side of the lesson plan is the sentence dictation. Some students can handle longer sentences, some cannot. So you'll just have to gauge what your student can handle. But you're going to say the word, and as you say it, you can touch like a magnet or a chip or whatever. So for example, el sol es grande, right? Touch each chip for each word. You can say to the student how many words are there. I have students who, don't put any spaces between their words. So you want to make sure, you can front load that and say, yes, there are 4 words. So we need to put spaces, make sure we have those 4 words. after you say the sentence, the student should touch each chip and repeat the whole sentence. This is going to give you a lot of good data. Can a student repeat back a sentence? Can they hold on to those 4 words in their minds? A lot of students can't. Are they hearing you correctly? Are they able to articulate the word back correctly? That's going to give you a lot of good data. I always, because that's like also our oral language data. So if they're, they're constantly mistaking, like hearing M's for N's or whatever, like you can document that. And then the student's going to write the sentence. Again, have your spelling charts out. Tell them to refer to them. You do not assist the student. If a student forgets a word, you're going to repeat the entire sentence and have the student repeat it back. So I have the COPs that I use here for English, and then this is the CUPs for Spanish. If you have something better that you like, please share. But you're going to go through this and have them edit. So first, I'm going to read the sentence that I just read to you. You're going to touch each word on your paper and make sure that you have each word as I read it out loud. A lot of the times, kids are missing words. So they're going to touch and read before we start editing. And we're going to go through. Do you have your capital? Do you have spaces between your words? And the kids can check off on their chart if, once they have each component. S is for spelling. Are there any words you're unsure of? And if they say yes, you're going to say, okay, show me, what are you unsure of? And then you're going to help error correct. You're going to say, look at your chart. This is the word, say the word. What sound do you hear? And ask them questions. Don't just tell them, but try to help them get to the correct answer themselves. So if anyone has a better editing checklist, please share. Okay. Any questions before we get into the other side of the lesson plan? We're good? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the new learning. Just some general information, some generic information. When you teach something new, you want to talk about placement, like where do you see the skill in a word, if it's like a phoneme, like an R blend or something like that. Draw attention to the mouth, especially for the vowels. So you can use mirrors, have them look in the mirror, make the sound. For example, like in English, a lot of kids get confused with, the short vowel sounds. It's very confusing for especially Spanish speakers. So I always like for O, you're like, ah, look, I'm making a circle, ah. So just giving them that cue helps them a lot of the times. So any cues you can give them with mouth positioning. And then giving them information like specific to whatever it is you're teaching. So like, are you teaching like a vowel pair? So Spanish has, when 2 strong vowels are together, then that would be 2 separate syllables. So just like bringing that concept to their attention. So like in tarea or rio or feo or whatever, like that's 2 separate syllables. Some vowel pairs though are said quickly, like Juan or Pien or whatever. So just teaching whatever concept you're teaching, just bringing their attention to that concept. And as you teach something, you want to ask a little question and teach a little more and ask a question. So you could say like, what sound are we learning? How do we spell it? Where does it come in a word? Things like that. You want to demonstrate how to form the letter if that's something that the student needs. MAPA is morphological and phonemic awareness. So again, we will be doing that in February, but that's something that we want to include in all our direct instruction. So just some things to keep in mind. For vowels, again, we want to say where they come in a word. We want to teach that they're unobstructed sounds, that air flows freely through the mouth, that there's a chin drop. So I find clapping syllables to be very confusing for kids because then they just like start clapping. We just want them to touch their chin and notice if their chin is dropping, the air is going through, and that's a syllable. For syllabication patterns, we want to teach them the rules for dividing the different kinds of patterns they're going to come across. Again, Spanish loves open syllables. CVCV is the most common pattern in words. So for CVCV, I say to them, underline the vowels. You can have them mark them with a V. You don't have to. But a prerequisite to this would be to have them know what vowels are. Like you need to teach them what are vowels, what are consonants. I do sorts, consonant sorts, vowel sorts, vowel like hunts. Like I'll give them just like a sheet with all different letters, and they have to hunt for the vowels and highlight the vowels. You know, magnetic letters, sorting the vowels. But they need to know what a vowel is. And then they cut. I tell them underline the vowels. Now, if there's nothing after the vowel, right, like in this word here, baby, there's nothing after this vowel. I don't need to cut anything. But right after the vowel, I tell them to cut. And then they see that that divides the word into 2 syllables. And then they can read it syllable by syllable and blend it together. So if they have to, they could read it be, and then baby. So CVC is the easiest to teach. It's so much fun once they realize that they can just divide. It helps them so much and gives them a lot of excitement and confidence. The next syllable type is VCV, where you have one vowel and then an open syllable. So in this syllable type, I teach them underline the vowels. It's pretty much the same as CVCV. You underline the vowels and you cut after the first vowel. So you have no. Any questions with that about teaching them how to divide the different words? Okay, so again, these go from most simple to most complex. That's what I mean by systematic. Structured literacy is systematic. So first they need to be able to read open syllables. So if you have a kid tomorrow who cannot read, you're going to teach them how to put a consonant with a vowel and how to put them together. And that makes an open syllable. And you're going to help them read all A syllables, right? Sa, ba, la, ta, ra. You're going to want to teach them the concepts of consonants, the concepts of vowels, what's a vowel, and just have them read syllables if that's where you're at. Then you're going to show them, look, I can put 2 open syllables together and make a word, and I cut right after the first vowel. And that would be the next step. Then you're going to show them some words start with a vowel, and that vowel is its own consonant. One chin drop, oo, no, right? So we're going to cut right after the U, and that's how we're going to read the word. So the next step is closed syllables. The great thing about Spanish is that the vowels always say the same things. How amazing is that? So in English, when we have closed syllable, we have to teach that the consonant closes in the vowel and makes it say its short sound. In Spanish, though, they don't have to know that. They just know that when they have consonant, vowel, consonant, that's a closed syllable. That's it. That's all they need to know. But how great is it that if we teach this, then when we transfer them over to English and teach them this in English, they're going to be like, oh, I know this. And it's going to make it that much easier to cut up words in English and help them read those words in English. So they're going to next learn to read closed syllable words. And you're going to tell them, listen, we have this other pattern. It's called consonant, vowel, consonant. And sometimes that vowel has a consonant after it and nothing else. No other vowel, like consonant, vowel, CV, CV. It's just consonant, vowel, consonant. And you're going to help them read that way. Then from there, we're going to go to vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel, because now we have a closed syllable and an open syllable. So now we have like esta, isla, norte. So all those closed syllables come first. The vowel consonant comes first. So they're going to cut, and I actually wrote out like a new learning for this. So if this is for closed syllable, because this other stuff, frankly, is like, it's very simple to teach. The open syllables, CV, even just teaching closed syllable. We have this closed syllable and they just read the closed syllables, right? But now when we get into the VCCV, it could be like a little bit trickier to teach it. So the prior knowledge they need to get to vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel is they have to have a firm understanding of consonants and vowels. They're able to read and cut their CV words. So they've built automaticity with that. And you've taught, I should add there, you have taught closed syllable. I would have taught that before teaching closed syllable with an open syllable, because that's what we're doing now. So you're going to tell the student some of our words have closed syllables with open syllables, and that can be trickier to read that word and know where to cut it. So,
Okay,
same thing.
Catherine,
Yes.
there's only like 15 minutes left. Just giving you
Okay,
time.
I'm almost done. Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. The last part down here, you guys can, check this out on your own. It's a intervention for addressing BD confusion in OG and structured literacy. We don't do the B and D hand because typically if a kid gets confused between what's B and what's D, they're not going to remember which hand is the B hand, which hand is the D hand. So we don't have a D hand. The D hand does not exist. We only have a B hand, and we use our B hand, and that's all we use. And if it's not a B, then it's the other one. And that's all we teach them. So, but you guys can check that out, but I am almost done. Thank you for the heads up though. Okay, so any questions on anything so far?
I don't see anything.
Okay, great. So we're going to teach them that the first vowel now is going to be followed by two consonants. And so we're going to underline the vowels in the word, and we're going to pull down the consonants in between those vowels and cut between the consonants. So you're going to say to the child, say las, for example. And then you're going to say, what vowel sound do you hear? The ah. What sound do you hear after the vowel? S. And then you're going to just bring to their attention is, it's S. Is that a vowel or a consonant? It's a consonant. And we're just bringing their attention to the fact that now we have these closed syllables in the front of our words. So that's a little auditory drill that we do before we start teaching. And then we say, okay, you're going to learn about closed syllable. Now you can break it up even more and say, we're just going to do closed syllable with S. Okay. In a closed syllable, hopefully you've taught this. I wouldn't do closed syllable and VCCV together, but in a closed syllable, we know that the vowel is closed in by a consonant. When you have a closed syllable that comes first in a word, you're going to cut after the consonant instead of after the vowel, like in your consonant vowel words. So our word pattern is changing. Now it's VCCV. So you're going to go through this with them. You're going to tell them, okay, let's underline the vowels, mark them with a V, hold down the consonants in between, mark them with a C. We're going to cut between the consonants and now read the word. If the student has their R blends and they're more advanced, you can put words with R blends in there and tell the child if there's an R blend that stays together. We don't cut. We don't divide that up. So I do, we do, you do. So I did one. Now we're going to do one or two together. Now you're going to try cutting one and you're going to have them keep saying the steps out loud. They're going to keep saying, underline the vowels, mark them with a V, hold down the consonants, mark them with a C. Where do we cut? Cut between the consonants. And we're just going to keep practicing that. So this is another pattern. A closed syllable can come at the end of the word, and here it would make vowel, consonant, vowel. So that's something you could do after teaching this. Just a word of caution to make sure when you're preparing your VCCV word list that they actually are true VCCV words and follow that pattern. Like say, like when I was making my AS closed syllable list, like words with as, right? I'm like, oh, casa. I'm like, no, that's two open syllables. That's not going to work. So just a word of caution there. The word pilotas. Oh, the word pilotas, I mean, it has the as in it, but the as is really like a suffix. So I would do that in a separate lesson and teach them about adding suffixes to words and how that means more than one. So you really want to make sure you're choosing words that are truly following that that pattern, that vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel pattern, VCCV. When you're teaching the R blends, just some, direct instruction concepts that you want to hit. They are two letters. They are two sounds. We say them quickly together. They can come at the beginning of the word, in the middle of words. They're inseparable. When we cut, they always stick together. They're best friends. So things like that. And then let me show you the lesson plan for new learning. So we have, here you would write what you're teaching. So I just did closed syllable, or actually I did vowel, consonant, consonant, vowel. So I would write that. Your connection to prior knowledge is always the same. So I would say you already know how to cut CVCV words, or I would say you already know about closed syllables. Now we're going to teach you another place you're going to find closed syllables. You're going to show them a card. So I just use a card like this. You can make your own, just put VCCV here, and you're showing them, oh, where are you going to cut between the consonants? This one's for English, but you can literally just get an index card, write VCCV. You can put a word underneath it, like whatever, está, whatever your word is, and show them that you would cut between the two consonants. So then the next day, when this goes into review and you do your sound cards, this would go first. And you would say, oh, what cutting pattern did we learn yesterday? Oh, we learned VCCV. When we have that pattern, where do we cut? Where do we cut the word? Stuff like that. If you're teaching like an R blend or something, the student is going to say and trace it 3 times and then say and write it 3 times. I also shared my good friend, Christina Borman, who I did my training with. She shared her student response sheets that I use. To be honest, with my students at the high school, I just had them do this in a notebook. But like for lower grades, this might be a nice template for you. So new material. If you're teaching a cutting pattern, they have nothing to say and write, right? They're going to be practicing coding the words. But for when you're doing a new learning, say you're teaching BR, they're going to write br, 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 and say it and trace it. And so where it says new material, they're going to be doing that right here. Okay, so addressing BD confusion, again, we only have the B hand, that's it. This is a great video. I do these drills with my students all the time where you have a like a grid like this. They have their B hand out in front of them and you tell them every single letter that looks like it might be a B, you're going to check your B hand. They're going to do drills, practicing reading the letters across with automaticity, because the quicker they can recognize it, the better they'll be able to transfer that over to reading. You can give them a word list with a lot of letters that look like B's and D's and maybe some P's, and have them keep checking their B hand so they can read it more automatically. Once they are able to identify the letters more automatically, try bringing it to syllables, bringing it to words. I just wanted to write, like, I see you and I understand the challenges that are happening everywhere. We have students who are, you know, they might, at the high school especially, absent a lot. That could be, you know, a challenge. Students who, you know, have experienced terrible traumas and are acting out, and maybe they're just frustrated because, you know, reading is so hard for them. Lack of materials is huge. So I just wanted to say, like, I am right there with you. And I feel like we need to just be there for each other, supporting each other. Sharing is caring. So anything that you have that you would like to share, please email me. I'll add it to the Padlet. But this Padlet has, you know, a bunch of resources to help you in your planning. This is a great YouTube video on syllable division. I get all my information on how to teach reading, multisensory reading from, well, not all, but a lot from this book and this book by Elsa Cardenas-Hagen. Elsa has a chapter in this book, which is fantastic, on teaching multilingual learners. This is the Amplify scope and sequence I was talking about. Here is the assessment. This is my scope and sequence right here, my little like teaching plan, data log, sound chart. I will add the Spanish one. This is the one I got from Teachers Pay Teachers with the syllable level, the syllable chart. These are my like some reading review list examples that I was showing you. And the BD reversal video is also here. Here's more reading lists. These are great like articulation cards to show like the vowels, the consonants. I find it very helpful for kids. It really is to see like the mouth positions. These are also, I just want to bring these to your attention. This is Elsa Cardenas-Hagen. She's a bilingual reading specialist and speech pathologist, and she has a Spanish multi-sensory structured literacy program. I've never seen them. I wish I could get my hands on them, but I have not. But if your district's ever looking for anything, I don't know, but I feel like these would be amazing. And then I get a lot of my word lists from Escalera. I have to modify them, but they do have a lot of great resources. And then this whole set on Amazon has also been very helpful for me. They have a lot of nice resources. So I have all those books. There's like 5 or 6 of them. This is like the latest one. This it's very structured. They all go from most simple to most complex. And then I just put some research down here, some helpful videos, and the benefits of bilingualism, because our goal is always multiliteracy and biliteracy, and having a teacher who is bilingual and certified as a reading specialist and a bilingual specialist for our students who are struggling and need that extra support. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you all so much for spending this time with us. I think we have a minute if there's any questions or no.
Well, I was just going to say thank you, Catherine, for a wonderful presentation. I did a link dump in the chat.
Okay.
So the PDF of the slides, the document that has the links for the items that Catherine shared, the Padlet. Don't forget to do your PD certificate. This will not be on the document that you can search for later. Then also just the next PLC series will be on February 3rd. Here's the link, but it's not live yet. Tickets will be available on January 1st. And then just for future reference, right? NJTESOL-NJBE Spring Conference registration is open. So please join us in May. Catherine, actually, you didn't mention your book club that you are going to run. So yes. Catherine, just give me a minute. And then also the Parent Expo is coming up. So please share that with your parents. We are going to have 6 presentations, and also a presentation by former students, right, graduates who have achieved the seal of biliteracy. And again, at the very bottom is the PD certificate link again. So Catherine, go ahead and share about your book club.
Yeah, so we are going to be having a book club. I just found it. It's Elsa Cardenas-Hagen's book, Teaching Foundational Literacy Skills to Multilingual Learners. And I'm going to be presenting on the book at NJTESOL-NJBE conference. I encourage you, it's an amazing book on how to teach reading to multilingual learners. So I encourage you to check it out. And at the conference, I'll just be like presenting on that. And, you know, if you buy it and I mean, I don't get like any royalties or anything, but if you are interested and would like to check out this book and try some of the strategies in the book, and then we can come together, I thought at NJTESOL-NJBE conference, and just talk about them and maybe questions you have and what's working and what's not working. And the presentation will also be a space for us to come together at the conference and talk about any of the PLCs that we did all year, and just like questions you have, comments, like this worked for me, but this isn't working, and what can I do about this student? And just like kind of just like a place where we can also meet and connect and yeah, just see each other in person.